Hello, I'm Chris Fowler for Sportscentury. His bat was all fury and thunder. It matched his disposition. Albert Belle was one of only 4 players in history with at least 8 consecutive seasons of 30 home runs and 100 RBI. And no one knocked in more runs in the 1990s, not even Mark McGwire or Barry Bonds. But his Hall of Fame numbers were overshadowed by a volcanic temper, and degenerative arthritis in his hip curtailed his career. As we'll see in the next half hour, pitchers couldn't figure him out, but then neither could anyone else.
When Albert Belle first came to the big leagues, he was so intense that pitches that he thought he should hit, and he swung and missed or popped him up or whatever, he would scream and holler obscenities at the pitcher, man. I mean, and he did it all the time.
This was in the Cape Cod League. There's a 1-1 count. Umpire goes strike, and he goes 1-2. So he says, let me see the indicator. The umpire took it out of the umpire's hand, put it down on home plate, took his bat, bam, cracked the indicator, looked at the umpire and said, it's 2-1.
He was known as Mr. Freeze because he would set the thermostat so low in the clubhouse, and it became uncomfortable for other players. And it was adjusted back up one day, and Albert came over and saw that it was set too high and turned it back down and then busted it, hit it with a bat.
He was a scary guy. He was scary not just to the media. He was scary to some players that played with him and against him, too.
Albert Belle suspended for 3 games today. This is a result of the bench-clearing brawl with the Kansas City Royals.
I think part of his game routine was getting in a mood of hatred, I guess, and he felt like he performed better that way.
If anger fueled his motivation, it was unacceptable in the college ranks. Albert Belle was kicked off the LSU team in 1987 after a series of emotional displays that included throwing his helmet and not running out balls. 3 years after signing with Cleveland, Belle landed in a clinic for anger management and alcohol abuse.
Albert had an alcohol problem at one time, and this guy wouldn't let him forget about it. I turned around, looked at this guy, and he just winged him and hit him right in the chest with a baseball.
When you saw it, you thought, no, I didn't really see that. He didn't really do that, but yeah, he did.
Based on instructions from my attorney, I will not comment on the appeal. Thank you.
Now a friendly little warning for you trick-or-treaters in the Cleveland area. When you get to Albert Belle's house, just keep walking. Kids upset about getting no candy at Belle's house threw eggs at his front door. Well, Belle came out, chased the kids, allegedly brushing one of them with his car.
For all his problems outside the batter's box, inside it, Belle was the model of focus. In 1995, he became the first major leaguer to hit 50 homers and 50 doubles in the same season, as he led the Indians to their first pennant in 41 years. But that fall, under the heat of World Series media scrutiny, he exploded.
Albert had an incident with Hannah Storm in the dugout that blew up. It was a tough thing for us to have to fight through, and at the end of it, it potentially was a distraction as we went into that first World Series.
John Hart had his press conference, and I think he considered it to be the culmination at that point of his career. And instead, he was asked about Albert dropping the F-bomb.
It was very embarrassing for me, my coaches, our organization, and his teammates. I mean, his teammates didn't like it. But I never saw Albert really show that he really cared. It embarrassed the rest of us.
Here he goes again, up over the screen. No excuse for what he's doing, regardless of the taunting that he was getting from the fans.
With 3 league suspensions for anger-related incidents, Belle in 1994 was sat down for 7 games for corking his bat. He had cast himself into a star villain. Then, against Milwaukee in 1996, he added still another notch to his gun.
There it is, Vigna.
Oh! And Albert just crushed him with a forearm. I mean, he just leveled him. Vigna looked like roadkill.
Earlier in the game, first base coach Dave Nelson criticized Belle for not trying to break up a double play and told him not to let it happen again.
Now, Fernando is thinking that Albert's going to let him tag him again, and it's going to be another easy double play. Well, there was no double play, And I mean, it was not a dirty play at all.
League President Gene Budig says the AL has opened an investigation of the Belle and the ball incident. How and why Albert Belle threw a baseball at Sports Illustrated photographer Tony Tomczyk.
After the incident in April of 1995, Belle was ordered by the league to attend anger management sessions.
Sitting down next to Charlie Mayer, the team psychologist, and I see Albert coming down the left field line, and he's looking at us. And I was walking down the dugout runway, and he stopped me, and he goes, "If you use anything about my case, I'm going to sue you, I'm going to sue the paper, I'm going to sue him, and I'm going to sue the ball club."
I think he was always sure that somehow somebody was out to get him.
It seemed to me he came from a little racially charged atmosphere at home, where it was black against white or white against black, and it didn't seem like the two should mix at any more than an arm's length.
Shreveport has had an emergence of strong segregationists, strong segregational setting, and little by little the barriers began to be broken.
Born just 4 minutes before his twin brother, Terry, on August 25, 1966 in Shreveport, Louisiana, Albert Jawan Belle, who would be known as Joey, grew up in a middle-class neighborhood. It was at home that the seeds of suspicion and perfection were planted.
His parents are black school teachers in a segregated city. Civil rights movement is starting to pick up a lot of steam and get really ugly. You understand why his parents raised him the way they did. Be cautious, be careful, be careful in who you trust.
He came from a very matriarchal family. His father never did seem to take the lead in speaking up. He's a very quiet man. We hear about ice skating mothers, and I think this might have been the ice skating mom in baseball.
Mrs. Belle raised her sons to be perfectionists. And I don't mean just to get an A on a project. A's not good enough. It's got to be A+. Albert was such a perfectionist, even as a little leaguer, that there's a game where he came up and he hit a big home run and he hit it to right field. And he circles the bases and he comes in the dugout and he flips off his batting helmet. And his teammates are jumping up and down and congratulating him. His coach comes over and says, "Gee, Joey, what's the matter?" He goes, "I was trying to hit it to center field."
I can just remember all his talk with his mother, and she used to say to me, "Pastor, pray for, our boy. He just gets so upset when something goes wrong."
A baseball and football star at Huntington High School, Belle graduated 6th in his class of 266 students and was named most intellectual by his peers. Along with Terry, he enrolled at LSU, where he made his mark in baseball.
He could hit it for distance, for average. He could run, he could throw. He had everything you'd look for in a superstar.
As a sophomore in 1986, Belle powered the Tigers to their first College World Series appearance. But his volatile, sometimes combative nature earned him frequent reprimands and the occasional benching by Coach Skip Bertman. As a junior, Belle's 21 homers and .349 batting average not only attracted Major League scouts, they made him a target of race baiters.
We got to the SEC tournament that year. From the time we got off the bus in Georgia, a group of frat guys go by on a pickup truck, screaming and hollering, "Joey, we're gonna be here tomorrow. See you tomorrow."
When tomorrow came, Belle's Tigers lost to Mississippi State in the championship game. But that didn't quell the surges of racial tension running through the stands.
There was one fan up behind him. The fan had a 2x4 over his shoulder, and he was yelling, "Buckwheat, buckwheat, buckwheat." Finally, the umpire goes, "Time out!" And Joey, he started running for this fan. Running up the hill, our first baseman, the umpires, went to stop him. He jumped the fence. Albert got stopped before he got there. Next at bat, he came to the plate after that incident. He hit a bomb to center field. Everybody thought it was gone. He crushed it.
He felt like, you know what, this is my exclamation point. These guys are ragging me. They're all over me. Everybody's been over me all year. And, you know, just to stick it in their face. And so he stands there and watches it. It hits at the base of the wall. And he has to leg out to get a single.
That was the last time I ever played with him, because after that incident, he got kicked off the team.
I think Skip was at a point where he said, me and the team have put up with this the entire year, but now it's gotten to the point where I think it may be a distraction to the team.
Obviously, that's right before the June draft. People backed off, then they went another direction. Position player-wise, we had him rated as the second best player in the country that year in the draft. Ken Griffey Jr. obviously was the first pick in the draft, and we had Albert second.
Labeled a gifted troublemaker, Belle was the 47th pick in the 1987 Major League Draft. Frustrated and angry, he would bear deep scars of racism for many years.
And some of the comments that were thrown at him really hurt him. And that caused him, I think, in a way to build a wall around him, to question people's intentions. There was a movie that came out of Mississippi Burning, and he said, Frank, that's a true story. That's what really occurs in the South. I mean, I got a feel from the stories he had told me over the years that he got a piece of that, not to the same extent as the movie, but got a piece of that, and that really shook him up.
Bud Shaw was doing a column on Albert, and Davey Nelson told him, you know, that he keeps his book. Bud wrote the column, and then the next day we're down in the locker room, and they start going nose to nose, screaming at each other. And he accuses Bud of going into his locker looking for his pitcher's book. And Sandy goes over and gets between them and pulling Bud away, and he says, stay away from him. Don't even talk to him. He's crazy. That guy's crazy.
When he wasn't accusing someone of violating his privacy, Belle's obsession with organization extended to the most improbable aspects of his daily life. He ritualized almost everything.
After games where he went 4 for 4, he would be in the cage with Terry hitting a line. In between at-bats and games when we played at home at LSU, he'd run to the cage and want a hit.
After every single at-bat, he used to come in from his at-bat, go to his locker, sit down, open up a notebook, and write down every single pitch sequence, how the pitcher got him out or how he got a hit off him.
He had a regiment that he did, and he did it religiously. Now, anybody who tried to crash into that regiment surely were about to provoke his wrath.
Usually, when you got the glare, you just knew not to go near him, or you certainly couldn't go near him while he was eating his 5 yogurts. I think that was a superstition. After every game, he had 5 yogurts.
Some people drink coffee, half milk. He drank half coffee, half Pepsi. I saw him one year eat a banana after every at-bat.
I took Albert out to eat one day. I noticed the way he eats, he only eats one thing at a time. He was very meticulous, very organized. I mean, he ate one thing first, then moved that aside, ate the other, and he would go in order, and that's the way he always prepared.
I would have lunch with Albert at noon on game day, the game that evening. And we'd sit there and chat and have just a wonderful time talking about any number of topics. By 4:30, I might pass Albert going from the dugout up to the clubhouse. And I go, hey, B, how you doing? And he'd look at me and walk past me like I was invisible. The transformation, that was the essence of Albert.
I've talked to people who sat maybe a row behind the family at some games and thought it was odd that they never seemed to speak to each other through 9 innings of the game. They were almost as focused as Albert was.
I think he was more of a perfectionist out on the field, and he wanted to perfect everything in the right way, and if it didn't, he was more upset with himself, but sometimes it made him look bad. He was just taking it out on himself and just kind of moped around.
If his tightly wound patterns of daily ritual, occasional rages, and deep mental focus were merely Belle's way to climb the scale of perfection, they would be regarded as no more than idiosyncrasies of a uniquely talented player. But in August of 1990, Belle revealed a new component to his persona.
Albert came to us and said he felt he had an alcohol problem at that particular time. So we provided help through the Cleveland Clinic.
After 10 weeks in treatment, Belle announced that he wanted to be known as Albert instead of Joey. But his identity problems ran considerably deeper.
I struggled to see Albert as an alcoholic. I never felt that Albert was weak. If he was a drinking man, we'd probably have seen it.
He'd tell me that he'd go to AA meetings. He'd tell me that he was an alcoholic, and I'd wrestle with that because I never saw him drink. He would tell me about the few times when he would just go out and just get blitzed because something happened that would cause that.
Apparently, there were issues that dealt with alcohol abuse that we weren't aware of. According to the psychiatrist, probably lent themselves to some of the issues Albert had with anger management.
I was told by people who worked with the Indians that it was Albert trying to come to grips with just getting so angry and so enraged, throwing a ball in the stands or doing things, that he was trying to come to grips with it. Because the one thing about Albert is that this man wanted to be the greatest hitter who ever lived. He had that same drive Ted Williams had.
But hidden beneath Belle's drive for perfection, his tirades and suspicions, was a reservoir of high intelligence and love of the game.
Media will never get to see him as a teammate gets to see him. So teammates ragged on him, and he liked being around players. He didn't like to isolate himself, contrary to popular belief.
There's Albert. Watch. I know you don't talk to anybody, but you talk to me whenever I want, so say something to him. Right. Say hello to Major League Baseball. Right. At least turn around and show him your face. Say hello. It's Albert Belle, ladies and gentlemen. Nice going. He's going to go hit now. All right, wireless mic goes off for a little bit.
Keep pressing your luck with me.
He'd sit down with you and just want to sit and talk, or just watch TV with you, not even talk. And if you got up to leave the room, hey, Frank, where are you going?
Albert comes over to me. I've spoken to him twice in my life. He's not speaking to the media. He goes, I saw you play chess with Brady once. Want to play chess? I won the first game. One more. Very competitive. I won the second game. At the end of the second game, where it was apparent that I was going to win, stood up, looked at me, and said, where the hell did you learn how to play chess?
He's a very smart guy. Used to crush crosswords. Probably still does, I'm sure. But yeah, with crosswords every day. Used to go over and get some answers from him and cheat off him a little bit.
He wanted an outlet to express his thoughts. He would send in some editorials to our paper. He wanted nothing to do with us personally, but I guess maybe it's the competitor in him. He probably felt like he could do a better job than us.
The first website that he had, part of the information on there was how to pick a stock. Now, how many baseball players are going to think of doing that?
Still another aspect of Belle was a deep, abiding belief in the power of prayer.
He would sign a baseball every time, Albert Belle, Philippians 4:13. Every single ball or picture that he signed. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that, he had those quotes on plaques in his house, on doilies in his table. Throughout his house was that scripture.
In spring training of 1993, when a boating accident took the lives of Indian pitchers Steve Olin and Tim Cruz, it was Belle who stepped forward and took the lead.
They closed the clubhouse. They were crying their eyes out. And in the midst of this, Albert Belle said, Grover, do you mind? I would like to call the team together to say a prayer. And he led the team in a 5-minute prayer to try to get us together and to help us deal with this. Albert Belle.
Mally's is a candy factory in Cleveland, and they named a candy bar after Albert Belle. And they had this big press conference planned, like I think at noon at the ballpark. Albert was going to come there to introduce the candy bar, and Albert didn't show. I don't know what happened, but I think he overslept. He said he couldn't get up in time to go to his own press conference to introduce his own candy bar.
But when it came to playing the game, Belle always showed up. Not once in his 12-year career was he on the disabled list.
He played every single day. He don't take days off. I remember one time he told him Grover gave him a day off, Mike Hargrove, and he goes, I don't need no days off. I mean, I just rest whenever I retire.
As a free agent after the 1996 season, he signed the richest contract in baseball with the White Sox, and he played every game for the next 2 seasons before moving to the Orioles. Then, in the spring of 2001, Belle was suddenly old at 34.
To his credit, he tried to play. It must have been horribly painful.
I mean, it was a degenerative arthritic hip, so he was basically running with bone on bone in that hip socket.
And I had him in the lineup, and he came into my office and said, can I have the day off? I need to rest my hip. And I said, sure, no problem. And I had him in the lineup the next day, and he came in and he said, I need another day off. And I said, sure, no problem. It came to a point that he said, he said, I've got a lot on my mind. There's a lot of decisions I have to make. I need to make some phone calls. Can I go do that? And I said, sure. And that's the last time I saw Albert.
If he was a likable character, it would have been a tragic thing to watch. But I'm afraid that a lot of people were probably enjoying it.
For a guy of his stature who was kind of borderline Hall of Fame, it's one of the strangest exits I think baseball has ever seen.
His leaving was no stranger than so many other aspects of the man who would be perfect. Although Belle fell short of that unreachable goal, he was arguably the most productive player of the 1990s and the most misunderstood.
He should have been the MVP in 1995. I mean, Mo Vaughn had no business winning that award. Albert was the guy. Albert had resurrected the Indians.
I picked Mo over Albert for MVP that year. I picked Albert second. Albert clearly had the better offensive numbers, but Albert was not a good citizen in baseball, and Mo was. That is something that you would have to consider when you're talking about the most valuable player award.
When stacked against his negative public image, Belle's 381 homers and more than 1,200 runs batted in may not weigh enough to get him through the door of baseball immortality.
I mean, I've spoken to him about it. I really don't think he cares. I think he'd like to be in the Hall of Fame. But as far as how he treated the media and the media treated him, I don't think he has any regrets at all.
The one thing that's a little unfair is there'll be a lot written and said that he was a detriment to his teams because he was eccentric. But I've always found that almost unanimously that his teammates respected him.
Albert Belle was moody and reclusive, and only rarely did he try to explain himself. Frequently, that task was undertaken by his twin brother, Terry, a former teammate of Albert's at LSU, who has a master's in business administration. Terry reportedly issued statements on his brother's behalf, including one that said Albert refused to exchange an autograph for a home run ball because it had been caught by a possible heckler. Albert never said he sanctioned having his twin brother act as his pinch hitter. For Sports Century, I'm Chris Fowler.